Welcome back. In that last module, you learned how to add a new clinic. In this module, you're going to learn how to add a new patient. This is pretty important since you'll be doing it multiple times per day. So here we go. So this is just your home screen, and you can head into patient, new/search, and it'll come up with these few boxes to add a new patient. So you're going to start by typing in the patient's name and their gender and their date of birth. Now the date of birth gets a little tricky because in the United States we always say the month and then the date, whereas in Jamaica they say the date and then the month. This program is configured in the United States way, so if this patient was born on September 1st of 1960, you can type it in just like that and it will adjust it to the way that it should be. But this is different than the way that the Jamaicans say their dates. So then it's also important because we never want to get two patients with the same name confused, although that doesn't happen that often. You want to add in a mobile phone number for these patients. And this is important even if it's an uncommon name, just so that we have another way of IDing patients. Also in here, so I got this by clicking this contact box, and that's where I enter their mobile phone. Also in this, if you have a pediatric patient who presents with their mother or another guardian, it's important to put those names in these boxes as well. So that doesn't apply here. So I'm all finished adding this, and I'm going to go to create new patient. So here you'll see a bunch of boxes pop up, and these are patients who match very similar the name that you just entered. So if you want to confirm that this John Smith is different than the other ones that you've entered here, you can click Confirm, Create New Patient. And that's going to open a bunch of different options, and this is where you can start your encounter. So the first thing to do to start a new encounter is to go up to this box where it says Encounter History. You have a drop-down box, and this is right up top next to the patient's name. So on this drop-down box, you want to create a new encounter. And then that's going to bring you down here. I can make this a little bigger, the new encounter form. So in this consultation brief description box, you can briefly put something there, the patient's chief complaint, just very brief. And then over here, you want to say that this is a new patient. This is where, remember, we brought up some patients who may have already attended a clinic in the past. You would click Establish Patient. But for this one, we're going to click a new patient. And then it's important to pick the facility where you are seeing this patient. So in the last module, we learned how to add a facility. So let's add the Bonnygate facility that we just added to the program in the previous module. So once I have just a brief description of why they're presenting, that it's a new patient, and the facility in which they're presenting, you can go ahead and click Save, and that will save that information and present you with some new options with what to do with this patient. So on every single patient, you'll be getting vitals. So that's under this clinical tab down here, vitals, and you have a bunch of different options of things that you can input. So you will not be getting all of these for every single patient, but it's important to put all the ones that you have received. So if this patient weighs 180 pounds, the computer will change that to measure it in kilos, and then you can enter the patient's height. Let's enter the patient's blood pressure. Let's say this patient is a little bit high, so we can deal with that diagnosis later. And then, as you can see, a bunch of different options. Now, one thing that you'll notice that is not on this list is blood glucose levels, and that we're going to start entering under Other Notes. So we can go ahead and enter, let's say John Smith's number is 110. So again, this is vitals. We found it under the clinical tab, and you always want to make sure that everything you type in, you click Save. So now you can see here that the patient's vitals are added. And if you notice, oops, I entered something wrong, it's a quick, easy fix. You just click Edit, and then you can change what you already have inputted. So you can go ahead and save that form. So the next thing that you're probably intrigued and interested about is doing a SOAP note. So again, that's under Clinical and SOAP. And here you can type in your various plan and assessment of this patient. So I'm just going to type in something very quickly so that we can see it later on. Let's say that he says that his shoulder hurts, and then maybe you are going to tell this patient to rest in ice. So obviously, this is just very simplistic, but I'm just entering this so we can see later where it goes. So let's go ahead and save that form. And that took a little bit longer than it usually does, but no worries. So then here, the soap note that I just put in, you can see here what we said earlier. And again, if you need to edit that, that's not an issue. And then for some patients, you might put in a review of systems. So that's also here, review of systems under clinical. And you can see that you have the various different systems that you can enter. And you can just click the boxes for what your patient is presenting with. And again, that's important to make sure that you click Save Form. So far we've added vitals, we've added a SOAP note, and you can alter your review of systems, and you can see all of these under the encounter history. So from here, we might be able to make a diagnosis for John Smith, and we can do that up here in this top part under medical problems. So if I want to click and edit and then add a medical problem, and this is where it's going to look a little bit differently than what you'll see in the clinic, because this demo doesn't have all of the problems that are already listed in that list at the on the computers you'll be using. So let's say that we want to add hypertension here, and then click Save, and we can see that under medical problems and the date that it was diagnosed. So if we want to go back, it's also important that we add medications. So we have the option for medications and prescriptions. Medications are things that the patient has been on in the past or is still using, whereas prescription is something that you're giving the patient at that particular visit. So if I want to add a prescription, I'm going to click Add, and then I'm going to get a bunch of different options. So this is another thing where it differs a little bit because the complete inventory isn't listed in this demo. But let's say I want to give this patient Lipitor. So again, when you drop down this menu, you will see a number of different options that aren't necessarily on this screen right now. So I'm going to click Lipitor, and then if you click it from the drop-down menu, it should fill in the quantity, the units, and how the patient should take it. It may be necessary to add different notes for either you or the pharmacy or the patient, so you can do that in this box. And then if you want, like we talked about just a second ago, the medication list, if you're interested in this prescription being added to that list, you'll want to change that to yes. So I've added the patient's medication. I have made sure that all of this is correct about how and when the patient should take it. Then you have the option to either save that prescription or to save and dispense that prescription. So saving the prescription is just going to add this Lipitor to your prescriptions list on this main screen, whereas save and dispense is going to tell you that the patient actually received the medication and that these 90 units of Lipitor are no longer in the inventory. So if you are confident that the patient received their medication and that it is no longer in your inventory, you can click Save and Dispense. Typically, you'll want to have the pharmacy be the only people who save and dispense the medication. So here, because I'm just prescribing this, I'm going to click Save, and then we can see how that you can add multiple prescriptions. That's not necessary here, but that's just an option. And then it's also easy, again, to edit the prescription if you realize that you made a mistake. So here I'm going to exit out of this prescription list, and we can see how this changed John Smith's home screen. We had the Lipitor, and then also you can see that that got added to his medications list. So if you are in the pharmacy and you are confident that that patient received this prescription and that it is out of your inventory, you can go into Edit. And then if this is the drug that I want to save and dispense, I'll click Edit again. And then, as we discussed earlier, I will click Save and Dispense. Alright, so then we are finished with that drug. And then we can just go through a quick review. We created a new encounter by this drop-down menu. We went through the Clinical tab to add the vitals, a SOAP note, a review of systems. We added the patient's medications, medical problems, and prescriptions from this top menu, and that's the gist of adding a new patient. Thanks.